some other state art projects, and she's just terrific and knowledgeable. So grateful that you could join us, and if you could take roll, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, yes, I will go ahead and take roll. Blakemore?
Here.
Gonzalez? Okay.
Here.
Oh, great. King?
Here.
Judge Klein? I do not see Judge Klein. Morales?
Here.
Vargas? Okay. And then Judge Seligman? And then for liaisons, I saw Selena, Laura Brown from Judicial Council is here, Melanie Snyder. I see we have Lauren Klein as well from LAC. Any other liaisons? Nope. Okay. And then for State Bar staff, Nguyen, McCrae, we have Zelnick, Crystal Bundang. I think that's it for panelists. I see we have a couple staff in attendees, but we'll promote them as needed. And then, of course, Kimberly.
Okay. I think we're going to do public comment. My request is that if you are a grantee and we are discussing your item later in the agenda, that we hear from you then, because it will just help us kind of connect the information you're providing us with the item that we're discussing. But we also welcome other public comment if there is any.
There's one person with their hand up. I'll allow them to speak.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Xavier Vargas. I'm just trying to get on as a panelist.
Great.
Terrific.
Good strategy. Raise your hand and ask to speak.
Yes.
Welcome.
And I'll add you to the attendee, or the role attendance.
Nice to see you. Is there anyone else raising their hand for public comment?
Not at this time.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Welcome.
All right, we have some administrative updates that Danielle's going to provide.
Catherine, do you want to first do approval of the minutes?
Oh, thank you. I skipped over that. Yes,
No
you are
worries.
right. Thank you. So why don't we approve the minutes of November 3rd, our last meeting? Feels so long ago.
I'll move.
Thank you, Angie. Is there a second?
I'll second Morales.
Thank you, Maria. And are there any comments or corrections to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, would you take the roll, Danielle? Thank you.
Yes. Gonzalez?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Judge Klein? Morales?
Yes.
Vargas?
Yes.
Blakemore?
Yes.
Motion
Thank you.
passes.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go to your administrative updates. Thank you.
Sure, of course. If you give me just a moment to share screen. Get that up here. Alrighty.
It looks like Judge Klein has now joined too.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Sorry, just a moment. Great. Okay. So this is our general meeting overview for today. We've rolled through a couple of these already, calling to order, roll call, approval of the minutes. I'll now do a couple administrative updates and grantee related updates, and then we'll move into the business for today's meeting related to IOLTA EAF budget revision and carryover requests, as well as IOLTA reporting requirements. So the first staff update here is on prospective applicants for 2025 IOLTA EAF funding. We have had several organizations reach out expressing interest in potentially applying as new grantees for IOLTA and EAF funding in the next application cycle. Over the last several months, staff have met with about a dozen different organizations that have expressed interest in applying. And those conversations have centered around the services they're currently providing, if staff feel like they may or may not meet the requirements of the IOLTA EAF grants, and providing technical assistance, answering any questions on our grant requirements and the like. So after those conversations, 6 of those organizations have set up a Smart Simple profile. And I wanted to give a very high level overview of some of those organizations. Happy to answer questions and also continue to provide these updates as we have meetings throughout this year. Kept it relatively high level today because we have such a heavy agenda. But 2 of those organizations focus a lot of their work on expungement. And as you may recall, there was a statutory change that now includes expungement, even though it's typically criminal law, in the umbrella of civil legal services for the purpose of IOLTA EAF funding. So I suspect now that that is qualifying work, where we'll get continue to get requests from organizations that do that kind of work. One of those organizations is based in Sacramento, and then the other serves Riverside and LA counties. There are also a couple organizations that are doing family law, DV work, and tenant rights, evictions, housing work. One of those is a smaller organization focused in Sacramento County, and then another smaller organization in Ventura County. And then finally, there is one organization doing immigration services for LGBTQ plus clients in the San Francisco area. I believe they're based in Oakland. And so that's kind of a general overview. I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. And then there's one other doing affirmative housing litigation and they have offices statewide. And Selena, I see you have your hand raised.
I feel like you can probably guess at my question. For folks who are new to this body, we had a lot of new programs last year. And so that really impacted the size of Equal Access Fund awards for current programs who were surprised when there were large programs. Of the 6 that have already started and the 6 that might start, are any of them like over $2 million, $3 million, $4 million?
Not that I know of. I don't have I will say I don't have complete information, so I can't say that for sure. But of the ones that I've talked to, while Erica has been out on leave the last couple months, which is 3 to 4 of the 6, they're not near that. A couple of them are under the $500,000 corporate expenditures. Or I'm sorry, 500,000. Yeah, 500,000 in corporate expenditures that requires the audit. They're under that audit threshold, so they're smaller. And then the immigration services organization serving LGBTQ plus clients, and looking at their materials online, it was about 1.5 million was their budget. So I haven't seen any that are over, 2, 3, 4 million at this point.
Well, feel free to connect them with me for kind of technical assistance and connection to community, because sometimes I can just, especially those smaller organizations, kind of need a buddy early on.
Great, I appreciate that.
I'm happy to hear there's not a very large one that will take from the pot and surprise everybody.
Yeah, as I understand it right now, that is not the case. But I will admit I don't necessarily have complete information on all of them, so I can do a little more digging before the next meeting.
So I have a question. Expungement, that is purely a criminal matter. I mean, the public defenders handle it, criminal judges handle it. It certainly has civil consequences. So does every criminal filing.
So
Is that
the
appropriate?
statute was changed. I think we just talked about this right as you
Oh.
were getting on. The statute changed and includes it within the definition of a allowed legal service.
Oh, they do. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. The streets were blocked. It was held again here.
No worries at all.
I was
Just
worried.
updating you
All right.
about what we did
So now-
right as you were joining.
So the statute allows 1203 point, whatever it is.
Correct.
Interesting. All
That's
right.
correct.
And that's a relatively new statutory change. I think that was in 2022 or 2023.
And then Danielle, can you just remind us of the application budget submission timelines? Because I think that's when sort of we'll know more who's actually submitted new applications and budgets.
Sure, absolutely. So the applications for this application cycle will be released in early April, I believe April 3rd. And those applications are due back May 15th. Anybody that is applying for funding, including current grantees, needs to submit their audited or reviewed financial statement by May 1st. So that will give us an indication of who is expecting to submit an application, but those applications are not due until May 15th.
Thank you. And maybe just a word about the committee's role, if any, in the application process for new grantees.
Sure. So the IOLTA EAF application process will run through EVR this spring and summer. So we'll touch on ILAW, which is kind of the first step, if you will, in eligibility in a couple moments. But once those applications come in May, staff will review those applications and then bring them to this committee for a recommendation to the commission on whether those various organizations should be found eligible for funding. If there are any questions or concerns that State Bar staff have about those applications as they come in, they will also go through this committee. So eligibility and budget review is really kind of the first stop in getting an application approved by the commission each year.
Okay, thank you for that. Or does anyone else on the committee have any questions about this update? Okay, I think we're good to go. Move on. Thank
Great.
you.
And the next update I wanted to quickly provide is an overview of our ILAW report, and ILAW stands for Impact, Litigation, and Advocacy Work report. As I mentioned, this is sort of the first step in eligibility review process each year. So these reports are required to be submitted by all of our current grantees. It was released, I believe, earlier this month in February and is due in mid-March. And this report serves two purposes. So it first is evaluative. It gives State Bar staff and the commission some insight into the impact litigation, class action cases, and advocacy work provided by organizations in 2023. We asked grantees to report on the number of hours spent on each of those activities and gives them an opportunity to demonstrate the impact and accomplishments of that work. It also is part of our eligibility review process each year, because while staff are reviewing these activities and reports, we want to confirm that it's qualifying work, that it's activities that are related to providing free civil legal services for the benefit of indigent persons if they are QLSPs. And if there are any activities where staff or the commission have concerns about whether the activity is qualifying in nature and find it to be not qualifying, the organization would need to deduct those related costs from their qualifying expenditures in their next application cycle. In the past, grantees needed to report on, I believe, their top 10 impact litigation cases and top 15 advocacy work items, and that has been reduced. So now grantees only need to report on the top advocacy activities in total, so impact litigation and advocacy work together. They only need to report on the top 10, and by top 10, we mean the ones that they spent the most time on. So any activities where they spent at least 50 hours, up to 10. And the staff will review the forum of those various cases and activities, as well as the target population. So we're looking to see if in a class action case, for example, if that class is majority indigent Californians, or if it would disproportionately impact indigent Californians. So staff are doing that first level review. Many hundreds of these get submitted, as you can imagine. There are about 100, 110 now grantees, which could all submit up to 10 advocacy activities. And so staff will do that first review, and then anything where staff have concerns or questions about whether the work is qualifying, it will be brought to EVR at your April meeting, so at the next meeting, which is why I wanted to give this overview today. Examples of some work that has come up to EVR in the past has included census outreach work, where grantees were going door to door, encouraging folks to participate in the census, and also voting rights work. There are some questions about whether that work in the past has been sufficiently related to civil legal services for indigent Californians. happy to answer any questions that the committee may have at this point.
So I think, Danielle, I think one thing that'll just be helpful for, if there's any committee members that haven't done this before, is there was a new rule that provided a more robust definition of what is a legal service, which is the criteria. It's actually very helpful, and I think gives examples, and there's a chart that sort of explains that. So if you could circulate that to people either with the materials or before, so they could just familiarize themselves with it, I think that would be really helpful as we're all sort of looking at the materials for the April meeting.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, we can incorporate that into the
That'd be
materials.
great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Question? Yeah, exactly. Mind meld.
Great. Okay, hearing none, I will move us right along. So the next is a brief update on some various monitoring visit and closeout items for 2022 and 2023 grants. So staff, particularly our fiscal staff, are working to close out the 2022 IOLTA EAF grants. As you may recall, grantees were able to spend down their 2022 EAF grants over 2 years. And so that grant period then ended at the end of 2023, just a couple months ago, which is why this closeout period is happening now in early 2024. Currently, staff have been able to fully close out 54 of the 103 grantees from 2022. And there are several pending for various reasons. Some of those are carryover requests that we will discuss later today. Some have budget deviations over 10%, but they didn't submit a budget deviation or budget revision request. So that will need to come back to the committee, but staff is still identifying who those folks are and the various modifications that will be required. There are a handful of grantees that have unspent funds from 2022 that the State Bar will be invoicing and asking to be returned. So the fiscal team is working with grantees to address any discrepancies. In the pot of folks that are not yet closed out, there are also some organizations where their quarterly expense reports that were submitted in real time during 2022 are not accurately reconciling with the closeout report that they submitted more recently. So staff is continuing to address those discrepancies, get those reports cleaned up, and then we'll plan to bring back those budget deviations that may need approval in April. Any questions on 2022 closeout?
How many grantees are there that are going to be invoiced for balances that remaining?
I don't have that number in front of me, but I think it's between 10 to 15. Yeah, I have that number, but not right in front of me right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions about the 2022 closeout? Okay.
And so on, just wanted to check in before I switch to monitoring visits. So in 2023, State Bar staff conducted monitoring visits with 34 organizations. The vast majority of those have also been closed out. There are a couple that the visits happened towards the end of the year, and so staff are still reviewing any follow-up materials and the like, but well on our way to getting those closed out. But also wanted to flag that there are 45 grantees that will receive a monitoring visit in 2024. So a much larger batch this year, and that is partially or really mostly driven by the fact that there are 10 new grantees this year. And so all 10 of those grantees will receive their first monitoring visit this year. For those that may not know, our monitoring visits are on a cycle typically of once every 3 years. So that's the routine schedule, and grantees kind of get on the year in which they start. So there's 10 new grantees for 2024. This also includes one follow-up visit with a Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations, or CCWRO. They received a monitoring visit in 2023, and there were several findings and concerns there. And so the commission has required that they receive a follow-up visit in 2024. I wanted to flag for committee members, as your role as a commissioner, not just a member of EVR, you are welcome to attend any of those monitoring visits if you would like. Staff are in the process of scheduling those. I believe we circulated the list of grantees that are getting a monitoring visit this year, but if we haven't, I'll make sure we send that out to you all. And so if there's any organizations that you want to join staff for that visit, please let us know and we'll try to accommodate that during scheduling. I'll do a more kind of robust.
There's a question, Danielle, from
Yeah.
Maria.
Yes.
Thank you, Danelle. Before you go forward, and pardon me, I'm just getting over a cold, so my voice sounds really nasally. Would you, with the monitoring visits, are they in person or are they via Zoom? I'm trying to remember. I think I asked that question before. I
No
can't
worries.
remember.
Yeah, so for the 10 new grantees, we're going in person, but the rest of those will be remote. Dawn, feel free to correct me. I'm not actually sure if the follow-up with CCWRO is in person or remote. But for those that are just having a routine monitoring visit, it'll be via Zoom.
And I'll give a little bit more context. So the monitoring visits that we go to visit programs, there's program component and the fiscal. That's a contractual obligation that we have with the Judicial Council. And before the pandemic, they were all done in person. And since the pandemic, they've been remote. But we are actually going to be phasing back into kind of a hybrid system. The Judicial Council is really open to what that will entail. And so we're mocking up something for the following year. So this year, they will still largely remain remote, with the exception that Danielle said. The 10 new programs will be in person. And I don't think we have decided on ones that need a follow-up, whether that should be in person or remote. But if you all have a preference, you can let us know and we can make that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think it's a nice opportunity for commission members to learn about programs and the review process, which is, I can say as a former ED, is a very robust process. And I think gives a good sense of what the organization is doing, and lots of different sort of governance issues and planning issues, and as well as the fiscal review. So it's a really good opportunity that I would encourage anyone who is able to do to join. And thanks for sending out. I think sending out the list again would help, Danielle. I'm not sure people are going to easily find it in their overflowing emails.
Absolutely, yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, this is still part of 5.1 and updates on monitoring visits, but wanted to provide an update on CCWRO. I'll give a brief overview of past action by this committee and the commission, and then we'll hand over to my colleague Jennifer to give a more recent update on the latest happenings with this organization. So CCWRO, as I mentioned, had a routine monitoring visit in 2023. That monitoring visit ended up resulting in several different program and fiscal findings related to incomplete and inaccurate and late submissions of reports, lack of performance evaluations for the executive director and staff, concerns about their inaccurate reports and fund accounting on the fiscal side as well. In addition to their routine monitoring visit, CCWRO also completed a desk review for their HP3 homelessness prevention grant. That is a federally sourced grant, which requires these additional desk reviews. That desk review also identified several concerns with the organization's fiscal reporting and fund accounting. As I understand it, they were not accurately splitting the funding or expenses of their HP2 and HP3 grants, and was billing them together, even though they are two separate grant sources. Additionally, CCWRO participated in an eligibility review conference during the 2024 application cycle last summer. So during the IOLTA EAF application process, if there are grantees or applicants, that staff or committee members have concerns about or want to get additional information about their services, their internal practices, policies, any eligibility concerns, we have this mechanism of an eligibility review conference. So CCWRO participated in one of those last year. Given some of these visit findings, they were ultimately found eligible for IOLTA funding for the 2024 year, contingent upon several conditions. And this list is not all of them, but I have the full motion available. I can read if helpful. But some of those conditions included CCWRO submitting complete, accurate, timely reports and additional documentation for their grants as requested. Also required State Bar staff keeping CCWRO's board of directors informed on these compliance concerns. And the commission also recommended that CCWRO hire a full-time accountant or bookkeeper to help them with the various fiscal concerns. More recently, in December of last year, the commission passed a resolution to address concerns with the HP3 grant award. That also had several conditions or additional requirements for CCWRO to comply with. Those included participating in a second desk review for their HP3 grants, revising various fiscal and programmatic reports that had been submitted inaccurately, and providing additional documentation to verify the information provided in those reports. And then more recently, in January of this year, commissioners and staff met with CCWRO staff and board of directors members to discuss the organization's quality and internal controls and ongoing HP3 grant issues. So I would invite my colleague Jennifer to take over here and give an update on both that meeting in January and any more recent happenings with the HP grant and committee.
Thanks, Danielle. On January 11th, as Danielle stated, staff and commissioners from EBR and the HP Funds Committee met with CCWRO and CCWRO's board president to discuss the concerns that Danielle outlined. Additionally, the commissioners specifically were interested in a few different things. CCWRO submitted its 2023 monitoring report response late. It failed to take some of the actions identified in the monitoring report. It submitted its 2024 IOLTA EAF budget late, and it submitted its HP3 quarter 8 services report late. So the commissioners raised concerns about timeliness, outstanding deliverables, and progress towards a set of HP3 deliverables that were due to the HP funds, or to staff, that were due to staff on January 31st. The commissioners and staff offered practicable solutions to CCWRO about improving certain issues. I will say the board president was very receptive and accepted responsibility. We also then the following day had staff meet with CCWRO to provide additional technical assistance in order to ensure that CCWRO could comply with the deliverable requirements by January 31st. Just briefly, CCWRO did timely submit all of its January 31st deliverables. These were specific to the HP3 grant. Unfortunately, there were several problems with the deliverables, which I'm happy to address if that's of interest to the committee. The HP Funds Committee met on February 22nd and passed another resolution that outlined some additional requirements that it proposed the commission should require at its upcoming March meeting. Those requirements were essentially to ensure that CCWRO can come into full compliance with its HP3 grant, because at the time the HP Funds Committee found that CCWRO was not yet fully in compliance with those requirements. That was to submit additional documentation, specifically in order to receive its remaining HP3 formula funds via monthly reimbursement rather than as a lump sum year 3 disbursement, to make some corrections on quarterly expenditure reports, and to revise a budget modification request and spend down plan. And I'm happy to take questions.
Anyone have any questions? It does not look like there's any questions. I'll just add that I attended the meeting. I agree with Jennifer's assessment that I thought the board chair was very responsive and concerned about what was happening. They had, I'll note, also hired an accountant who seemed to have an understanding of the kinds of fiscal reporting that was needed. So I think that was encouraging. I think I still was left with some concerns about whether they could meet the commission's expectations of submitting timely and complete documents. So it's, I think that's a part of the discussion later on today because they submitted a budget revision request. They didn't timely submit a budget carryover request. And so we'll, I think, get into some of that during that next discussion. Okay. Go ahead, Angie. Did you have something you wanted to say? No. Okay. Your little box lit up. That's why I was asking. Okay.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for joining us today. And that concludes the various staff reports. So the next agenda item would be 6.1, which is related to 2022 EAF budget revision and carryover requests.
Okay, so why don't we just launch into the various requests for 2022? When I met with Danielle earlier, we've tried to organize this in a way for the ones that staff didn't have concerns about, the ones, and then some other ones, as you'll see later on in the agenda, that there's probably a need for a greater discussion by the committee. So we'll just kind of go through those in the order that Danielle has them on the slides. Go ahead.
Great, thank you, Catherine. And I wanted to provide a couple quick overview points before we jump into the various grantee requests. So a budget revision or budget modification request is required when a grantee's actual or expected grant expenditures differ than those in the approved budget. So if a grantee wants to move money from one budget line item to another, that would be a budget deviation. And if those budget deviations sum to greater than 10% of the grant award amount, it requires a revision request. And those requests, there's a couple different review tiers. So as I mentioned, if it's a less than 10% deviation, no request is required. If it's between 10 and 25%, staff have the authority to approve that budget revision request. And if it is a budget revision equal to or greater than 25%, it must go to the commission for approval. And that's the requests we'll be speaking about today. Similarly, with carryover requests, a carryover is when a grantee wants to spend grant funds after the grant period for which they were awarded. And it has similar thresholds here. So they are allowed what we call a self-executing carryover if it's less than 10% of the grant amount. Some of our discretionary grants do not allow any carryovers at all. So this is kind of a non-starter, but for IOLTA EAF, we can allow that self-executing carryover of less than 10%. And again, staff have authority to approve those between 10 and 25% of the grant amount, and those equal to or greater than 25% must go to the commission for approval. And typically, staff and the commission have approved budget modifications so long as the budget is found to be in compliance with the grant requirements and the recommended spending ratios of our grants, which is spending 75% or more on personnel costs and also spending 75% or more on non-administrative costs. For carryovers, the commission has historically had some hesitancy around approving some really large carryovers. That's given both this committee and the commission pause in the past. And that cause for concern is that there's a desire to make sure that grantees are spending the dollars and providing services in the grant period for which the funds were awarded, rather than carrying those funds over indefinitely and building what might be considered a reserve. To address some of these concerns, I wanted to give some context that there is a pending state bar rule change or set of new state bar rules around budget revisions, or in the new rules, they're called budget modifications, and carryover requests. This has been, was approved by the commission last November and went out for public comment earlier this year, but it must still go back to the State Bar Board of Trustees this spring for approval. So you all are not currently, these rules are not are not active yet. You are not beholden to these rules yet, but in case they're helpful in evaluating the request today, I want to provide them as context and guidance, because that was one of the purposes of putting these rules in place, was to provide greater guidance to staff and the commission when they're evaluating these requests. So the factors to consider that are in the pending rule as it relates to budget modifications are the grantee's explanation for the change in spending and the need for a budget modification, the size of the budget modification, and the grantee's ability to spend funds in accordance with that new budget, any impact on proposed grant services and deliverables, ensuring we're keeping in mind the requirements and purpose of the grant, and any other factors determined relevant by the committee or commission.
So Danielle, just for clarity, the 2022 budget revisions were revising budgets that ended on December 31st, right?
So yes, so for the, yes, and the reason why we are doing 2022 EAF again is because they had 2 years to spend those down. So those would have ended December 31st of 2023 for these 2022 EAF requests. The same is actually true for the 2023 request that we'll look at after, and that all of these, the grant period technically ends December 31st of 2023. So yes, presumably, except for carryovers with the budget revisions, presumably these dollars have already been spent and they're now making the request to ensure that that use of funds was appropriate and in alignment with our requirements.
Yeah, thank you.
And then for carryovers, there's a similar list of factors to consider. Again, the grantee's explanation for the underspending and need for a carryover, the size of the carryover request, and grantee's ability to spend down remaining funds, the grantee's history with large carryover requests, their plan to avoid carryover requests in the future, requirements and purpose of the grant, and other factors determined relevant by the commission. There also is a clause in the pending rule that allows approval of carryovers equal to or greater than 50% of the grant award, only in extraordinary circumstances. So again, this rule is not in place yet. You are not required to have a finding of extraordinary circumstances to approve carryovers greater than or equal to 50% that are in front of you today, but wanted to provide that guidance if it is of interest in your decisions today. Okay, so for 2022
Can we
EAF,
just ask, just before we start, I just wondered if anybody had any questions about kind of the proposed rule, and just, okay, it seems like not, so we're good, thank you.
yeah, of course. No, I appreciate stopping to make sure we're on the same page. Great, so as it relates to 2022 EAF, there are only 3 requests that require commission review and approval. One is a budget revision request from Public Advocates, and it's 25% of their budgets are right at that threshold for commission review and approval. Basically, Public Advocates planned to hire an attorney for a role and ended up hiring a non-attorney advocate, and so the money that is moving is from an attorney salary line to other staff salary line. And then for EAF carryover requests for 2022, there's one from IOLTA of 47% of their grant amount, and one from Riverside Legal Aid, which is 25% of their grant amount. Generally, both of these organizations discussed experiencing declines in demand for some of their services because of COVID relief programs, and also declines in volunteer and client bases for in-person services that could not be delivered in the same way during the pandemic. IOLTA also mentioned they had had some staff turnover at their organization. So happy to answer any additional questions on these requests. I'll say generally staff had no concerns with these requests and would recommend approval. But again, happy to answer any questions you may have on these.
Are there any questions or comments about these three, one budget revision and two 2022 EAF carryover requests?
Just a quick question on the carryover requests. As
Yes.
we better understood the ask and circumstances that led to the ask, is the approach extend the time? It gives us more time to figure out maybe things to normalize post-COVID, or is part of the decision making like that new normal has shifted, and therefore like even with the extended time they have to come up with something new? Does my question make sense?
I think so. And I think it's a little of both. So I think for some organizations, because you'll see there's several carryover requests for the 2023 grant award amounts. And some of the reasons for those requests are similar. There's, impacts of COVID. And so I think it's a little bit of both. I think a couple factors that are at play here is the 2023 EAF allocations were much larger than they had historically been. And that was happening at the same time that there were some real hiring challenges in the legal aid community and also limitations on in-person services or the type of services that could be delivered. Also, several organizations were doing a lot of housing work and like eviction defense before the pandemic, but then COVID relief and rental assistance programs made the demand for those services much different and much lower. And so that was part of it. And so when grantees made these carryover requests, we asked them to give us an explanation for why they're making this request, but also to explain to us how they plan to spend down any remaining funds in the first 6 months of the following year, because our carryover period is only 6 months. And so they had various kind of strategies for doing that, but some of that was using EAF to fill holes that were left by other funding sources that had ended, or adding staff that they weren't typically able to fund with EAF to their EAF grant, again, because for like the EAF awards were so much larger than anticipated or had been in the past. Yeah, so does that answer your question? Great, okay. And then I see Eloina also has her hand raised.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So for the budget revision request, I just want to make sure I understand this. So is it that they spent the money, but just on something other than what they had outlined in their application? Okay.
Yes, exactly. And in looking at those budget revision requests for both 2022 and 2023, staff is making sure that, to the best of our understanding, it is still in accordance with all of the state bar requirements. So there's no concerns there. But yes, the revision is that they're moving money from one budget line item to another in their budget.
And Danielle, just maybe for clarification, remind the committee members, if there's a 2022 EAF carryover, when does that money have to be spent?
Yes, so that they would have a 6-month spend down period. So anything that was not spent through June 30th of 2024 would need to be returned as unspent funds.
Okay, are there other questions about the budget revisions or carryover request? And thanks, Javier and Eloina, for your good questions. And Danielle, is your suggestion that we there be a resolution passed around these? Do you want to put that up and see if there's comments about that?
Yes, so I would propose, because there are so many requests that we sort of chunk these out. And so I would recommend, or for the committee's consideration, that a resolution be passed to handle the 2022 EAF budget revision and carryover requests. And it reads as such: resolved that the Eligibility and Budget Review Committee recommends approval of all 2022 EAF budget revision and carryover requests equal to or in excess of 25% of the grant award, as reflected in attachment B of staff's March 1 memorandum to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission.
Are there any comments or questions about the budget, about this resolution? Okay, is there a motion about the resolution?
I can call for a motion.
Okay, motion to approve the resolution.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, I think Elowina might have done that, so would you mind
Okay.
seconding?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Thank you. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, could you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Gonzalez,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Vargas,
Yes.
Blakemore.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay. Okay. So that concludes action item or agenda item 6.1 on 2022 EAF budget revision and carryovers. And now we'll switch over into 2023, both IOLTA and EAF budget revisions and carryover requests. So these 2023 grants were a one-year grant through calendar year 2023. And again, grantees are submitting requests if they spent the money in a way that is different than their approved budget, or when we get to carryovers, they would like to extend the period by which they could spend those funds down. And any approved carryover requests would have the first 6 months of 2024 to spend down those funds. And so I'll say there are 2 slides on budget revision requests. We got budget revision requests from 3 organizations. These are the first 2. They're broken up in this way because staff do not have concerns about these 2 requests, but do have concerns about a different organization's request. So just to foreshadow that there will be one more budget revision. I also wanted to note that the memo includes an IOLTA EAF budget revision request from Youth Law Center that in the memo was at 26.6%. Since the materials have been posted, Youth Law Center and staff identified a calculation adjustment that was needed. And so when that calculation adjustment is corrected, Youth Law Center's request actually only totaled about 11% of their grant award amount and therefore does not require commission review. It would be in that staff approval threshold. So it leaves us with these 2 to discuss at this point. One is from Legal Services of Northern California. It is for their EAF grant and about 34% of the grant amount. And one is from Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance, or GBLA. They have both budget revision requests for IOLTA and EAF. And I will flag that in the memo and in the submitted budget revision requests, their EAF grant revision request totaled about 49% of the grant amount. But in conversation with staff and written communication with staff, they've identified that most of that budget revision is actually funds that they intend to return to the State Bar as unspent funds. So when you deduct out that the money that they intend to return, it's actually only about a 5% budget revision request, and that the funds are actually being spent differently. I also should mention at this point, if there are members of the public that want to make public comment on these items. Catherine, I don't know if you want to take them now.
No,
or
that's
after
what I
we
thought
have
we
a
would.
discussion.
Are you done with your presentation? That was my intent to ask if anyone from
Sure.
the public wanted to speak about these before we proceeded.
Yeah, I can answer any questions if there are specific questions about these requests, but again, I'll say staff had no concerns about these requests generally related to hiring challenges and hiring staff, other than expected in the sort. No concerns with these ones, so we would recommend approval.
Okay, and are there any comments from members of the public about any of the requests on the current slide?
No one has their hand raised.
Thank you, Kim.
Welcome.
So I think we will, any comments or questions from commission members? Okay, if not, I'm sorry, was there a question? No. Do you want to read the resolution? I'll proceed to the resolution. Thank you.
Sure, yes. There's a committee, or yes, committee decision here, I guess, that you could either have this be a standalone resolution, or I can kind of read the language of this one, because there's one more grantee that's also related to 2023 budget revision requests. I don't know if you want to have it as a resolved and further resolved in the same motion, or if you prefer to do them entirely separately.
Why don't we just do this one, because we've taught, we've had the presentation, and then we'll go to the next one, I think.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, thank
okay.
you.
Yep. So let me pull up. Oh, so let me read it, excuse me. Resolved that the Eligibility and Budget Review Committee recommends approval of 2023 IOLTA EAF budget revision requests from Legal Services of Northern California and Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance in excess of 25% of the grant award, as reflected in Attachment B of staff's March 1 memorandum to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. I can change that semicolon to a period to indicate that this is that would be the end of this resolution.
Thank you.
Give me just a moment.
While she's correcting the punctuation, are there any questions from commission members about the resolution or comments?
Pulling it back up. This one.
Okay, and not seeing any questions or comments, is there a motion relative to this resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Maria. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Angie. Any other discussion from commission members? Not seeing any. If you could call roll, Danielle, that'd be terrific.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Vargas,
Yes.
Blakemore.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay. So as I mentioned, there's one more organization that submitted a 2023 IOLTA or EAF budget revision request, and that organization is CCWRO, which we discussed earlier today. And so I know that there was a grant award amount, or excuse me, a revision amount presented in the memo. Since the memo has been posted, in conversation with CCWRO, we've identified that those revision requests were not correct. CCWRO submitted proposed IOLTA and EAF budget originally totaled to much more than their grant award amount. It seems that they put in the same budget table their 2023 funds and also either 2022 carryover funds or 2024 funds. We were unable to basically separate out what they were asking to be their new proposed budget. They've since corrected their EAF budget, and so they have submitted a budget revision request for their EAF grant that totals to about 31% of their grant amount. However, it includes 34% spending on non-personnel costs, which we typically would like to see at 25% or lower. However, at this point, they still have not submitted a proposed IOLTA budget that equals their grant award amount and would not be tenable for approval as I understand it.
Danielle, just as I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no.
These are the funds that they're revising the budget that had to be spent by 2020, the end of 2023?
Yes. And so we asked them to submit a budget revision request, which should in theory be how they spent the money in 2023. They also have a carryover request, which we'll talk about. And so I think some of these funds may not have actually been spent yet. But yes, it is for a grant period that is now passed. And at this time, we don't know how those IOLTA funds were spent.
Okay, and then on the 34%, which is, so the general rule is 75% on personnel and 25% on non-personnel. Sometimes I know grantees have used contractors to provide a service that otherwise would be delivered by a staff person. Do we know what the nature of this 34% non-personnel spending is that takes it over the threshold?
Sure. So the budget revision explanation that was submitted, and I'll mention this was not in the original submission, it was submitted late, but the explanation was that, like many other organizations, we have had challenges hiring staff that has resulted in using some of the money to hire consultants and some of the money to be carried over. And so they mentioned that they hired consultants, but that's the extent of their explanation, I believe, for that. I can pull up. There would have been actually a question on specifically on personnel versus non-personnel, so I can pull that up as well. And I believe, I don't know if he has his hand raised, but I believe somebody from CCWR was intending to speak. Dwan also has her hand raised.
Okay, it looks like Kevin has his hand up, but Dwan, do you want to speak
Oh
first?
yeah, I was gonna say, Danielle, it might be helpful to walk the committee members to we don't know what the IOLTA is, but did they submit expenditures report at all for 2023? And was it zero, and that's why they would need to revise, or how? Because
That's
yeah,
a good question. So they would have had to submit expenditure reporting through 2023 on those grants.
But in the last quarterly report, correct?
Yes. I don't know the answer to that offhand, but I can look it up, because we would have expenditure reports from them, presumably for 2023.
I guess my question is more directed, like if they how much money have they spent, and if they're revising, what's like the amount that they're revising, because it just so for context.
Sure.
Is it possible just to pause for a moment? Well, I think it's an excellent question, Dwan, so that we can maybe have someone look at Smart Simple and provide the answer to that.
Yes, I was pulling up.
Take your time.
Okay. Sorry about this. Yeah, it'll take me just a moment. If there are any other questions or reactions while I'm pulling that up, feel free to.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to understand. I mean, it's a little hard for us to discuss a budget revision when there's an amount that's unknown.
Right. I mean,
I feel like understanding a bit more would be helpful. And Maria, please feel free to go ahead.
Just really quickly, do we have a representative?
He has his hand up, Kevin S.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So as soon as I was thinking, like, because if Danielle can find the information, then we'll have that in front of us, and then we can hear from CWRO's executive director.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
I'll save my questions until after the presentation.
Thank you.
okay. Pulling up their IOLTA EAF 2023 quarterly reports. I'm hitting open, and Smart Simple is not yet opening, but I am working on it.
Danielle, I have the remaining amounts for IOLTA and EAF. I'm just on backup, so.
Sure, that would be great. I think IOLTA would be helpful.
So let's do IOLTA first and then EAF so we can.
Sure. So I think for IOLTA, CCWR was awarded 361,323, and there seems to be a remaining balance of 10,260.
Okay.
Is that the expenditures report, Crystal? So they have reported that they expended everything but 10,000?
151, but let me double check our production environment. I just didn't want to crosswire.
I see those same numbers on production. I got it eventually opened. So yes, their IOLTA 2023 IOLTA was 361,000, and they reported spending 351,000 and having 10,000 remaining.
Okay.
Are we so the unknown is so at least we know that. Can we assume that the unknown then is the universe is 10,000 something or less? Is that how we should read that? Or we just
I don't know. I would be
Okay.
interested to hear what CCWRO, like if their submitted expense reports are accurate and therefore we can use those as the basis for what's unspent. There seems to have been some misunderstanding about what needed to be submitted as part of the budget revision and carryover request. So I would like to hear confirmation from them that like we can refer to their 2023 expense reporting as a basis.
Okay, and then can you just give us is the amount, so it looks like, what was the EAF award amount for 2023?
EAF award amount was $225,046. And they reported spending $156,753. So the remaining balance would be $68,293 as of when they submitted this expense report, I believe in early February.
But that expense report was through December, right?
Yes.
So the amount of the carry forward in the budget revision is different than the amount that remained spent by $1,000 and some dollars. If I didn't do the math exactly in my head, but
it's
so
slightly different for the budget revision here. Yes, that's not, I can let me stop sharing for just a moment actually, to see, because they also submitted a carryover request late, and I want to see what the amount of that is, because it may not be exactly the same as the budget revision. The submitted carryover request amount was $68,293, which is what is in their expense report as remaining unspent funds. Yes.
so where did this, I'm sorry, so the 69,000 that was on the slide, what was that number about?
It could have been money that they did spend, but spent in a slightly different budget line item. So it's a budget revision.
I see, I got it. Okay. Budget revision versus a carryover.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have, I'm a little lost what you need the commission to do, because I'm not sure that the amounts rise to the threshold of what we would be approving.
Sure. So I guess staff concern is that we don't have an accurate revised budget to approve, either by the committee or staff. At this point, the revised budget that has been submitted is much more than their grant award amount. If the commission is comfortable with us using their expense report as the baseline and providing the technical assistance that their budget revision table needs to match that expenditure report that they've submitted, then I would agree the threshold then drops below commission approval. But I think there was some real staff hesitancy, or at least I'll speak for myself. I had some real hesitancy about approving a budget that does not total to the right grant award amount.
Okay,
I'll jump in
why
because
don't
the
we
numbers
take-
don't reconcile. So I was just going to say, because the numbers don't reconcile, so the staff has the authority to approve it, but we are not approving at this juncture because we don't feel comfortable, and so we're bringing it to the full committee as a what should be the next steps.
Okay, I appreciate that. Should we take a moment to hear from Kevin Aslanian? Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I just came in, so there was a couple questions. One question is that 34% was used for we overused the non-personnel, and the reason for that is because we had challenges hiring staff, so we hired consultants, and consultants appear on the non-personnel side of the ledger.
And so can you just, that's correct. So could you just help us understand what kinds of consultants you hired? Like, did you hire attorneys as consultants, or?
But we hired an IT consultant to deal with CalSAWS. CalSAWS is the big computer system that has caused a lot of havoc in the public benefits world. And we hired a consultant to work on that and to back up the group of people, including CCWRO and other qualified legal services programs, who are working with CalSAWS to try to remedy a lot of the problems. Because it was an IT consultant that we hired. And the legal services people were happy with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And as to the numbers, I guess we have a new person who's working on that, and we do have an expense report, and we, if there's something that needs to be fixed, I mean, that's technical stuff that could be fixed. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what else I could say. Maybe someday we could get one of those AIs to do this, but we're not there yet.
Okay, any other information you want to share?
I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Okay, so I think, Maria, I think you had a comment or question.
I did. I just wanted to see if maybe there was more explanation in terms of the first question about the IOTA budget, and I'm not sure I fully understand what any more details in terms of the challenge. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around the discrepancies and the numbers not matching up. And it sounds to me as though staff is also having those challenges. And so I'm not comfortable unless staff is making the recommendation for us to move forward. So I'm just hoping to hear some more details and questions from staff to the applicant to see how we could have these numbers line up. But it still sounds very vague to me, and I'm not quite certain I understand what these challenges are.
Yeah, so I wonder, I mean, Dawn, I'm not really sure how we can, I mean, I think people don't know what they could approve given the information. So the form is submitted, seems like it was incomplete, didn't have an IOLTA request. Staff kind of on the fly in this call was helpful and provided us with information about what had been spent, but those numbers aren't exactly the same as what was submitted. So is it, so since I actually, it's hard for me to see like a path by which we could do something today, would it be possible for like a work group of this group to meet with staff and then make a recommendation to the full commission so that either it would be solved and people felt like there was a recommendation they could make, or it wouldn't be solved and people would feel like they would then would have no choice but to deny the budget revision?
Yeah, absolutely. You have all of those at your discretion. You can form a working group to work with staff. I would keep the working group at 2 members so that we're not subject to having to notice the meeting, or you can have it delegated to I've seen other committees do it, working with the chair. So I think that's with the committee's kind of discretion. I will say though, the vagueness and the challenges, this is something that's been ongoing, and that I think that is part of the larger problem here, is that on the HP side, I think if you were at the November commission meeting, you heard that there was over 100 hours of technical assistance provided for the HP grant. Since that November meeting, there's been another 60 or 70 hours of technical assistance on just the HP side. I can't speak to the hours on the IOLTA and EF, but there have also been repeated requests and repeated back and forths, and we are where we're at today without that clarity. And so I think it's that pattern that we're at. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I share that concern. I saw other people nodding their heads about that concern. I guess I think because I view this as a serious problem, I would like to join, and I think it's helpful to have one other member from this committee join so that there's at least a small work group of us that could delve into it and make a recommendation to the commission, kind of given the seriousness of what's happened and the fact that we already held a meeting with in January with the board chair and the ED and the accountant. Just I think makes all of us a bit concerned about that. So if you are willing to join a small work group, maybe let Dwan know and somebody could join me and we'll just proceed to make a recommendation based on what we hopefully can quickly find to be the nature of the budget revision request. And anyway, I think the other, so we can do that for this, and my sense is that might also apply to a carryover request if a carryover request was made, although I know that it wasn't made on time.
In drafting a resolution for your consideration, would that be that working group look at both the IOLTA and EAF
Yes.
request? Great. Okay.
And you don't need a resolution for that because you're not gonna, it sounds
We're
like
not
you're
taking
gonna
any action. We're
defer,
just,
yeah. So
Okay.
you'll vote on I believe, if you haven't already, you'll vote on the ones that you feel comfortable today. And if there's not a decision for CCRWO, you don't have to vote on anything. We'll just do a working group, and then we'll move forward with presenting that working group's recommendation to the commission.
so I think we voted on the earlier ones, which is why
Yeah.
they got separated. And so I think this group would be charged with both the budget revision and any carry forward request with a recommendation to the full commission.
Okay, great. So given that, I'm gonna actually remove, well, I won't remove these slides, but I was gonna say remove the discussion of the Coalition of Welfare Rights carryover requests, but maybe we'll just, I can present the information we have, but we'll move quickly through it.
I think, right, we're not going to take any action on it because the carryover ties to whatever the budget revision is, so you can't do one without the other. And
Sure.
I don't think a carryover request was submitted by the deadline, which is a further complication.
Yes, exactly. I'll say, so I won't spend slides on it, but I'll just say that in trying to provide the technical assistance and get clarification on the budget revision requests, CCWRO indicated earlier this week that they had meant to also submit a carryover request. That carryover request was not submitted by the January 31st due date, and so it was submitted, I believe, yesterday for consideration. So yeah, I agree that the working group can tackle that as well, but just to give that context, because it was not in the memo since it was just submitted this week.
Sorry, Danielle, just to clarify, that carryover request was for which grant? The one that was submitted yesterday?
EAF. Yes, there was an EAF
Okay.
carryover.
But there wasn't one yet submitted for IOLTA, which might have a balance of 10,000.
Let me double check. I have EAF on the slide. It might be that they submitted one for IOLTA, but it was under the commission.
You don't, you know what, you don't actually need to, we
Okay.
don't need to spend our time now. I think we have we'll have a working group that will spend some time and make a recommendation
Okay.
About it to the full commission.
Great. They did submit one for IOLTA, but it was under the review threshold.
Okay, but I think given that it wasn't submitted on time, I think it still should be within the purview of the work groups so that we can just look at everything at one time.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Why don't we move on to the next item?
Yeah, let me get to the right place in the slides. Great. So that concludes our discussion of budget revisions for 2023 IOLTA EAF. And now we will discuss carryovers. And pulling that up now. Okay. Great, making sure I'm sharing the right screen. Great, so there were a number of carryover requests between, for either 2023 IOLTA or EAF. 6 of those, 7 if you include CCWRO, but we've decided we're setting them aside for now. There are 6 that are between 25% the review threshold that triggers commission review and 50%. Which again, the pending rules on carryover requests are not yet enacted, they are pending. But in those rules, requests equal to or greater than 50% would require a finding of extraordinary circumstances. Because of that guidance and because of this committee and the commission's past concerns with approving carryovers equal to or greater than 50%, staff has split up the carryover requests into 2 buckets. So the first is those under that 55 or 50% threshold, and there are 6 of those. They are from CRLA, Legal Services of Northern California, Public Law Center, Legal Aid Society of San Bernardino, Disability Rights California, and Mental Health Advocacy Services. And those requests range from 25% to 30% of the various grant award amounts. There's only one for IOLTA from CRLA, and then the rest are EAF grants. In terms of the general explanations for the need for the carryover, multiple grantees noted, again, those increased grant sizes. 2022 IOLTA, or excuse me, EAF was very large, and a lot of grantees carried that into 2023. And so then they were trying to simultaneously spend down their 2022 and 2023 EAF grants. Continued hiring difficulties in the legal aid community, and also again, decreased demand for some services due to COVID relief programs. Staff found these explanations reasonable and therefore would recommend approval of these requests, but happy to take any questions that the committee may have or comments that the committee may have. And also, I believe we have some members of the public from these various organizations available.
Yeah, so let's just start and see if any commission members have any questions or concerns about the staff recommendation to that they're satisfied with the explanations and the amounts of the carry forward. Are there any concerns about approval of these? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions or concerns. So just because of the amount of things we have, let's if there's a motion to approve these, that would be great.
Yes. And again, I can make this, if we don't want this to be a resolved and further resolved with the other ones, would you rather this
Yeah,
ended
I just do this one. You can, we know you're going to add a period. You don't have to do it right now.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, since I had closed it, it did. I apologize.
Okay, that's fine.
I was moving too quick. Great. So the proposed resolution would be this: resolved that the Eligibility and Budget Review Committee recommends approval of 2023 IOLTA EAF carryover requests equal to or in excess of 25% of the grant amount, but less than 50% of the grant award amount, as reflected in Attachment B of staff's March 1 memorandum to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission.
And those are the 6 grantees that were on the prior slide, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution as stated?
So moved.
Thank you, Angie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Judge Klein. Is there any other comment or discussion from commission members about the resolution? Okay, I think we are ready to vote.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Morales?
Yes.
Vargas?
Yes.
Blakemore?
Yes.
Motion carries. Alrighty. And so then our last set of requests to discuss are those IOLTA EAF, actually they're all EAF, carryover requests that are equal to or greater than 50% of the grant award amount. Those were submitted by California Women's Law Center at 100%, LAFLA Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles 69%, Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance at 68%. The reason why it's an asterisk is, as we mentioned, they actually are proposing to return a large chunk of those funds. So then what would actually be carried over with the intent to spend it down in the first 6 months of 2024 would be only 25% of their grant award amount. But brought it here since technically the carryover request is the full 68%. California Indian Legal Services with 54%, ILAW 52%, and Law Foundation of Silicon Valley right at 50%. So, Catherine, would you prefer that we take these in some order, or would invite your or committee's thoughts on any of the requests or questions on any of the requests.
Yeah, so why don't we see if the committee has questions about the requests? And I think there are representatives from some or all of the representatives here that we could hear from as well. So are there any preliminary questions, or would you prefer to hear from the organizations? I see Angie saying hear from the organizations, I think. So why don't we do that? I guess I have a couple of questions I'm interested in, is just information about the capacity to spend this in the first 6 months of the year. The capacity then to spend this in combination with your next year's EAF. And I don't know, I mean, I'm guessing, but I don't know that people have already begun to spend this because we're now into March. And even though it hasn't been officially approved, it seems possible that people would have spent some of these funds already. And if so, I'm interested in knowing kind of the status of that. So those are my questions that if the representatives could address, that would be terrific. And let's just take them up in the order they're there. Is there anyone here from California Women's Law Center?
There's one person that has their hand up. I'll allow them to talk.
Okay, that looks like Betsy Butler. Welcome, Betsy.
Hello, thank you so much. I just want to start off by saying we are so appreciative of this funding, and it's such a horrible problem to have to spend this money since it's so needed. But I just want to start off by what was just mentioned, and that yes, 2022 was a very generous year. Again, thank you for that. And our 100% carryover is really a reflection of that generous money and then trying to catch up. To answer your question specifically that you just mentioned, Catherine, we are on track. Well, I should actually back up. In 2022, when we were aware of this money, we did hire a full-time housing attorney. And we, until recently, had HP2 and HP3 grant funding, which now we're done with HP2, a little bit of HP3. So all of our housing attorneys' time will be spent on the EF grant in 2024. And specifically with regard to your question, we are tracking right now that at least $50,000 of the 2023 EF funds have been spent this quarter, in this first quarter in 2024. So we very much think that now that we have consolidated these grants, we just have IOLTA and EAF, and that the balance of our housing attorneys' work will be under the EF grant and applicable to that. So we believe we'll be okay in spending this money. We also hired another attorney last August who's working on some housing matters, but we do have one attorney who's fully dedicated, or not fully dedicated, but 75% of her time is doing housing work under the EF grant.
So Betsy, if you don't mind, just a question. So you're asking for a carryover of 225,000 roughly.
Correct.
And your rate of spending in the first quarter seems to be 50,000. You have to spend these funds by June. So in my head, if I doubled 50,000, that would be 100,000. That would still leave you with a unspent balance of 125,000. So are you going to be able to spend the full 225 by June 30th? How is?
Yeah, so we do have another attorney who's working on some housing matters. But yeah, I'm hopeful we can get there. I know we're taking a good chunk of it. It's kind of hard to know right now because we do have a lot of housing work going on.
But you're clear you have to spend it by June 30th, right?
Right.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Did you have something else you wanted to say?
Well, if you want us to, track that out, as I said, we already know we're spending the 50. We can continue to move through the rest of the first half of the year to see where we think that will land.
Okay, let's just see if other commission members have questions and then loop back about what we think might be helpful.
Okay.
Does anyone else have a question? I'm not seeing any questions. And how much is your equal access grant for 2024?
It remained the same. It's the 225.
Okay, and how confident do you feel that you'll spend? Well, I guess what is your plan to spend the 2024 grant then?
We probably will take a partial carryover. But again, you know, now that our housing attorney she was focused on doing work that was in 3 different grants, and now she's just going to be doing work under this one grant. So we are fairly confident with all that she's doing that we'll get there, plus another part-time of another attorney on staff. And there might be some carryover. Yeah, there might be.
Okay, any questions about for Betsy Butler? So maybe we'll just move on to the next one, Danielle, does
Sure.
make sense? Okay, I think Sylvia Arjueta is here for LAFLA, last I looked, so if she is, maybe Sylvia can join us and just give us an explanation about kind of the carry forward amount, how they're spending it, and how much they've spent already, if she knows, and the amount, and their capacity to spend the Equal Access Fund for the 2024 Equal Access Fund funding.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Very much appreciate it. How are you? I'm sorry, I didn't speak over you. Well, thank you, everybody. We really, again, I want to reiterate how much we really appreciate this funding and how meaningful it is. I'm going to start by a mea culpa. So as you see in your documents, our explanation was not what LAFLA standards usually are. And while not an excuse, I just wanted to make sure you all knew that one of the things that occurred was that I was away. I had cervical spine surgery February 2nd, and we submitted our documents before then. And I promise you, had I been at the office, we would have given you a much more robust explanation. So I'm doing that now. So as you know, as others have said during this meeting, the 22-23 award, which LAFLA split into two-year period, and it was about $2.5 million for LAFLA that we had to spend, and we have spent. So I'm glad to report that. For fiscal year 2023, our award was a little over $1 million. And as you can see, we were somewhat challenged to spend it for the following reasons. You've heard some of those before. We had staff turnover, some unfilled positions. One item that was really in particular to LAFLA was the delayed union negotiations, which we had, both the CFO and I had planned would absolutely cover the 2023 award. But unbeknownst to us, the union had refused to sit down and negotiate with us for a new collective bargaining agreement. I'm happy to report that is happening this year. It's happening imminently. And we hope, we've set a schedule that we will be done with bargaining, we hope, by late April, I'm sorry. So we also had other staff that unfortunately on recruitment and retention that resulted in some of the unfilled positions, other staff who left, poached by other folks in government. But we also had some issues capturing and tracking staff billing on legal server. And while that has created some of the issues that created this large carryover, I'm happy to report that in order to meet the carryover, one of the items that I'm very happy to report to you is that we are on track to spending these funds. We are currently on track for the month of January and February. As we're closing February, we've already spent $123,582. for the month of January, which we expect the same amounts because staffing has not changed for February. So we are on track to not only spend the entire carryover by June 30th of 24, but we will be slightly over and using partly the funds for 2024. We also hope to, we created, so you know what caused this, we created a very, I think, a very good tracking system that was a team of the technology department here at LAFLA, finance and development, in order to ensure that we monitor our spending much more carefully for all of our grants, but specifically for EAF, as we've never been in this position. And just as an aside, I just wanted to say that LAFLA has never had such a large carryover. The last carryover that we had was in 2021, and it was about 6.5% of our award. So this is a new place for us to be. As you know, we are, I think, very good stewards of your money, not only because it's important to be that, but because it's about client services for us. So we are, I think, at this point, very much on track, not only to meeting, but exceeding that carryover. Then we will charge the 24 grant. We also have put into place some various communications to staff to ensure that everybody's fully aware of how we should be billing and how to ensure that some billing that did happen that was charged either to LSC or to other funders. Our staff, one thing we noticed in our legal server program was that we have a default fund that it goes to, and staff and frankly, management had not been tracking carefully that staff should be clicking the right grant. And so we had this unanticipated carryover for EAF. So happy to answer any more questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks. Thank you, Sylvia. Are there questions for Sylvia? Not hearing any. Okay, thank you. Let's hear from Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance. I think, as was reported by Danielle, they have already made the decision to return a portion of the equal access funding, and so their percentage of carry forward would actually be 25% approximately. So significantly less than the 68% that was initially identified. But is there anyone here from Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance that wants to speak?
I'll allow them to speak. I just want to remind that there's a 3-minute time limit on speaking.
Okay, thank you. I think because we've asked kind of some specific questions, that it might go over that a little bit, but
okay.
And Kim, I believe Gabriella is from IOLTA. I'm not sure that she's from GBLA, but I could be mistaken.
So Gabriella, are you from Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance?
No, I'm from ILAW.
Okay, so we're going to get to ILAW shortly. Does that work for you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think there might not be anybody here from Greater Bakersfield.
Yeah, I see Adam Reed is in the attendees, and I believe he's at Greater Bakersfield, but he doesn't have his hand raised.
He's Riverside Blade.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to California Indian Legal Services, which I think might be Heather Osler.
Hi there. Are you able to hear me?
We are. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure thing. Thanks for allowing me to submit a few comments. Appreciate this discussion today, and happy to share some insight as to why our carryover is fairly high. I think the good news is that we are on track. I'll just start there to continue to spend. We have some exciting projects, but as with most legal aids, there is a high staffing turnover, and sometimes that delays projects, not even particularly working on the projects, but lead attorneys who are having to dedicate time to recruitment and retention activities. But we have really great projects that are actually being using the resources right now to be able to print, to be able to develop websites, to be able to do really important work with those items that were slated for the EAF funds. We have are tying out a lot of that work. Part of one of our major projects that we were working on that had to do with a water study had to go out for review and go through several iterations and to ensure accuracy. So that was an important piece that delayed that, you know, was sort of out of our control because we were working with outside partners. So for us, we're really looking at having an intentional plan to spend well before the June 30 deadline if we were approved for the carryover. But really, it looks like we have the right staff in place and people who have a good plan in order to meet that.
Okay, and have you spent, some of the other grantees have talked about money that they've spent in January and February. Have you yet spent any of the remaining funds, the 107,000?
Yes. Yes. So we have been spending probably close to about 40,000 so far of those remaining funds.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. How about, I think we're now back to Gabriela Perez from Inland Empire Latino Lawyers Association. Thanks for joining. Go ahead, Gabriela.
I apologize, I didn't see the unmute. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak. So very quickly, I do believe that ILAW would benefit from both carryover requests. I know that our 2022 EAF was approved. And the reason for this is because we really want to make our 2024 budget go further since it has been significantly reduced. We are aware that the monies must be spent down by June 30th, 2024, and I want to emphasize that the carryovers are not going to be used to create a reserve. Again, with limited funding this year for 2024, we risk the chance of turning people away towards the end of the year. So the carryover will essentially help offset the risk. And on paper, the large carryover request, 52% seems daunting. However, a spending plan is currently being worked on so that we can spend the carryover from 22, 23, and 24 concurrently. So we have quite a few allocations that will vary by county, citizenship status, as well as the legal problem. So we've created monthly quota goals for the amount of cases open, outreach events, clinics, as well as Know Your Rights workshops. There's been a change in leadership, so I just recently came into the position, and our previous ED is now our clinic manager. So we've expanded our pro bono roster significantly and formalized the commitment to the organization, meaning minimum hours of volunteerism and minimum cases to review. We've also revamped our intern and volunteer program, which has been extremely helpful in these first couple of months of 2024 to supplement support staff, because one of the biggest challenges was personnel. However, again, with the uptick in volunteerism, the clinics have increased in frequency as well as the client attendance. And as a new ED, I'm prioritizing outreach and strategic partnerships to better utilize the time of our limited staff. A lot of our community and faith-based organizations have been really enthusiastic to promote the services and essentially are bringing clients to us so that we can efficiently provide the direct services. Another new approach that we have is utilizing technology that will allow us to remove some of the barriers in accessing services in our rural parts of the counties, as well as a legal server build out that will help us spend down our 2024 monies. And then we do have 3 new support staff personnel salaries, and we're exploring a part-time pro bono attorney transitioning into a part-time employee. And then another exciting strategy is collaborating with other legal aids in the region so that we can ensure that we're a safety net and helping clients who don't qualify for their services due to restrictions with their other grantors. So we are filling the needs of the region between legal aids rather than trying to compete for similar funding opportunities. And also with the statute change that you spoke about earlier in the meeting, we've had an increased interest from community members throughout Riverside and San Bernardino counties that want to work together on expungement clinics, summits, and know your rights workshops. And although it is usually seen as a criminal issue, we see how impactful the expungement clinics are. Through expungements, we're able to help our clients have access to education, housing, employment, and overall social and economic mobility. So we're really prioritizing our strategic planning, our vision, and our mission. Again, new leadership, new board members. We do have new staff, but rather than having the turnover, we're really focusing on retention and making sure that our services are being impacted or impacting our clients and going a long way. Another thing that we did include in the budget revision is an expansion into DVROs. So although many courts do provide assistance at no cost, IOLTA has a unique relationship with its clients. During the traumatic experiences, they really appreciate connecting with people who speak their native language and have the time to explain the process in depth. Again, IOLTA staff and board members are not only interested in providing legal services, we're finding ways to continue to alleviate poverty. Many of our board members are on this call right now. They've made themselves available to attend the meeting to better understand our current financial situation, the carryover process, and how to best support me in order to spend down these monies. So thank you to my board in attendance, and thank you for the committee for their time.
Thank you, Gabriela. Any other questions for Gabriela? Okay, I'm not seeing any, and that takes us to our last one. Is there someone here from Law Foundation of Silicon Valley? I don't think any, Cynthia has her hand up, I think. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you. So good afternoon. Thank you to the Commission for the opportunity to speak with you today. Firstly, to Commissioner Blakemore's question, I want to make clear that we have now reforecasted our spending through calendar year 2024, and we are confident that we can spend down the 2023 EAF grant carryover by June 30th. We believe this to be the case because, frankly said, the reason we're in this position is because the 2022 EAF grant amount was unusually high, and we needed the additional calendar years that were referenced earlier to spend it down completely. The position that we are in now is we are spending these funds at a much higher rate. This was shown by our 2023 spending. Last year, we implemented an organization-wide salary increase as a part of our long-term staffing and recruitment and retention strategy. These salaries have resulted in higher spend down rates across all of our grant sources. I will share our staffing has mostly stabilized, so really, really good news for our community and client base. And our teams are operating at full capacity, and we do not anticipate any major changes on this front. I will also share our current monthly spend down rate on the EAF funds is approximately between $33,000 and $50,000. At this rate, we would spend down the 2023 EAF grant carryover in as little as 3 months, maybe as at most 5 months. And finally, while I do not have the precise calculations in front of me, we estimate that we've already spent down a significant portion of this money. Since, to be candid, we've experienced a reduction in local funding for some of our housing legal services work.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. That was helpful. Anybody else have questions that they want to ask Cynthia? Okay, thank you. So I think what we are tasked with doing is deciding if we want to approve all of these. Speaking for myself, I'll say for me, it would be helpful with the one with California Women's Law Center that has 100% of the grant carryover. They offered to provide some additional information, sort of showing that they would be able to spend the full EAF grant within that period of time. And that's helpful to me because, at least with the information about what they've spent so far, that seems harder to understand how that would happen. So I would just request that they provide that information to the state bar staff so that it could be shared with the full commission, just as part of our due diligence of ensuring that the money is timely spent. But open to other suggestions and comments, Angie.
Are you saying then that you want to take them out of the regular approval on a motion?
I think I would approve it with a request to them that they submit that additional information, just so that we have it, given that they're carrying over an entire year's worth of funding.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Other comments, questions?
We have another
Tuan has a
member.
comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
We have
Betsy.
another member, has her hand raised again. You want me to allow her?
Tuan, did you want to go did you have a comment first?
Yeah, I just got a comment. So, I think it was on the same lines as you, Catherine. Like, it was so helpful to hear all the programs, and I'm so glad everybody seems to have a plan in place that's pretty aggressive to spend it down. I think my only question mark would be the California Women's Law Center, because the numbers I don't see how they would be on track, given that there's also they would still need to spend their HP funding this year, and they're getting another large EF grant next year. So I would want to feel very confident. I would want the commission to feel very confident that they can spend it down, because if you grant them a full carryover and they actually don't spend it down, by the time we determine that, it's the end of June, but then with expenditure support, we will not be able to distribute that money for EEF for next year, because just the timing kind of doesn't work out, because you need a quarter and then we have to do a sweep, because at the end of June, then they have, I think, is it a month or two to then submit expenditures report? I don't think we would have the unspent funds number by the time that we ran the formula, or it might be really close. So if there are unspent funds, we wouldn't be able to roll it into the distribution for this coming year. We have to wait another year. So I guess my concern is, if we sit on it and they're not able to spend it, we could have distributed it and somebody else could have spent it.
So I guess that was my request, was that they provide the information so there could be greater certainty about the rate of spending, so that we knew that there would do, and we could report accordingly to the full commission, who could either adopt a recommendation of approving the carryover request or decide that because the rate of spending was not going to be sufficient to get them there, that it could take a different action if it chose to do so.
Yes, and I think that works. And then I think we probably would need just not, because they're saying that they're moving, from what I heard, maybe I misunderstood, it's some staff from their HP. So we need to know, like, I think from those grants too, then how are they going to spend down their HP? Because it's all.
So could we, maybe the better solution, Dawn, is that we ask that they work with bar staff to provide the information that will help the full commission understand how HP and the 2 equal access grants will be timely spent, and not, I don't need my prescriptive language. I was just trying to think of something that would like provide the assurance that I think will be helpful to the full commission.
Because it does seem like there might be a domino effect, and we just want to make sure there's like a comprehensive plan, because I think what the commission doesn't want is a carryover on top of a carryover, because you're just deferring, and then the money's just sitting there and not being spent.
Well, I think the new rules suggest that in subsequent years, people, if it's above 50%, then have to show extraordinary circumstances. So I think maybe the better approach is we approve this. It seems like if I'm looking at sort of where people are, there's a desire to approve the carry forwards, but to then ask that California Women Lawyers Law Center, provide, they work with staff to provide additional information to show how the funds will be spent in the timelines envisioned by the grants. Does that work?
That works.
Yeah. Okay. Betsy okay. Let's do Angie and then Betsy. Thank you, Angie.
My question was, if you're going to do that, which I agree, should we put a deadline on it? Because I think Duan's comment is appropriate. The money doesn't get used if we don't take care of it.
I think the deadline is the commission meeting, is what I'm we have a commission meeting at the end of this month, and that would be my recommendation, is the deadline.
Well,
not
that
wait.
has to be some number of days before that deadline, before the meeting, right? So
exactly,
that you have the chance to talk with them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Betsy, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you again. We can put these numbers together fairly quickly. We were unaware that there's an opportunity to return funds. We did do that with HP3 because we certainly don't want to take funds away from anybody else. We have pretty much already spent our HP3 funds, so we feel confident with that. But so yes, we can get some numbers back to you immediately so that this money can get back out to everyone. Not a problem whatsoever. We did not know that was an option.
Thank you for that, Betsy. That's quite helpful. So we'll leave it to you and Juan and her team to get the numbers that can then be shared with the full commission.
Tremendous. Thanks.
Great. And then in the meantime, is there a resolution?
Yes, so I guess in terms of the resolution, would you prefer to not vote on California Women's Law Center yet, or I can have it as a further result? I can pull it up.
I think Angie has an opinion about this, so I'm going to let her speak to how she would like what her.
No, I think it should all be in one resolution, but I like the idea of having a deadline on their getting the information back, and Betsy seems able to do that, so I don't see a problem.
So I had started drafting, but I admittedly was drafting as you all were talking, so I cannot promise it is free of.
Okay, so let's just read it, or do you want to read it out loud? Sure. And then we can make sure it.
Yes. This states, resolved that the Eligibility and Budget Review Committee recommends approval of 2023 EAF carryover requests equal to or in excess of 50% of the grant award amount, but less than 70% of the grant award amount, because the next highest was 69%, as reflected in staff's March 1 presentation to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. And it is further resolved that the Eligibility and Budget Revision Committee recommends approval of California Women's Law Center's 2023 carryover request in excess of 50% of the grant award, as reflected in staff's presentation to the commission, conditional upon CWLC providing additional information to State Bar staff, demonstrating their ability to spend down the carryover funds by June 30, 2024.
So I think it is, so one, there needs to be a deadline by which they're going to provide the information. And I think Dwan's request was that it not just be spending down the carryover funds, but other grant funds, right? As required by the grant deadlines. So I think it's a little bit broader.
Period end dates.
That's fine. For me, it's fine. And then I think, I don't know, do you want to make sure you have the information how many days before, Dwan?
I think if we can get it in the next 2 weeks, because that'll give us a week to review.
Okay, so what would 2 weeks go? So 14 days from March 1st happens to be March, that's easy now, March 5th. March 5th.
March 15th would be great.
Okay. Everybody good with the resolution as Danielle on the fly so eloquently drafted it? Okay. Any other comments or questions from commission members? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution that's on the screen?
I'll move.
Thank you, Angie. Is there a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge Klein. And if there's no other comments, I think we're ready for a roll call.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Morales?
Yes.
Vargas?
I think he may have dropped off.
Okay. And Blakemore?
Yes.
Motion carries.
So I want to just thank all the grantees who participated and provided us with the additional information that was really helpful. We appreciate you taking time from lots of other work we know you have to do, and for the commission members for your thinking about these particular carryovers. So I think with that, we are done and mostly on time even, maybe even a little ahead.
We have one more item related to IOLTA reporting, but yes, we are done
Oh,
with
yeah, I
the-
know we have, but,
Oh,
but that's
okay.
a fun discussion, I think, right?
Yes, yes. So yes, no, to echo Catherine's comments, thank you to the grantees and the committee members for the great discussion. That was certainly the meaty part of the agenda as it relates to the budget revision and carryover requests. The next action item or agenda item, excuse me, is 7.1 and relates to 2024 IOLTA EAF reporting requirements. I'll just say that this will be a non-voting item today, as I understand it, or that's the plan. And I'll turn it over to lead program analyst Crystal Bunding to lead the discussion on this item.
Thanks, Danielle. Let me go ahead and share screen. I have a deck prepared as well. Okay. Just making sure everyone sees the screen. As Danielle mentioned, this is just a discussion item for the Eligibility and Budget Review Committee today. This is under 7.1, discussion and action on 2024 IOLTA EAF expense reporting requirements. Just as a reminder for some background, at its August 10th meeting, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission approved the following resolution. And I'll go ahead and read the language. It's relatively short. Resolved, due to the significant increase in 2024 IOLTA funds for distribution, the Legal Services Trust Fund Committee approves a flexible 4-year spending period for 2024 IOLTA funds, as well as a change to IOLTA expenditure reporting from a quarterly basis to a semi-annual basis. In terms of the updates regarding the expenditure reporting, I believe this was the motion approved, and after consultation with our fiscal staff and sort of the existing framework, there aren't any related issues to bring forth to discussion for this committee. Just noting that that there will now be sort of separated expenditure reporting. EAF will be continued, expenditures will be continued to be reported on a quarterly basis, and IOLTA now on a semi-annual basis. That's the change here. Another consideration of the significant increase, the Commission had also expressed interest in gathering additional data to understand the impact of IOLTA funds. I think some acknowledgement that not all IOLTA funds are spent on civil legal services or specific program work. The Commission felt that it was important for accountability to have more concrete and quantifiable data about the use of IOLTA funds. So that's some background. I also wanted to set some background in terms of what the current reporting framework looks like across our grants. And this is just a few quick tables which I'll walk through. At the top of this slide, you have your annual legal aid reports. This includes our case summary report, the main and economic benefits reports, and the impact litigation and advocacy work report, which Danielle gave a great overview about earlier today's meeting. QLSPs are required to submit the first two, and then all grantees are required to submit the ILAW report. Basically, these annual legal aid reports collects information about the work across the entire organization, regardless of funding sources. So this includes both state FAR grants and non-state FAR grants, and then this reporting period is for a calendar year of January 1 to December 31st. The table below talks about the specific state FAR grant reporting. There's EAF, partnership grant, homelessness prevention, sort of a list. We have a lot of them now. Folks can read them themselves. Organizations who received any of these grants are required to submit relevant services and expenditure information specific to their grant. This frequency does vary depending on the relevant state or federal grant requirements. And then, also described in the applicable reporting requirements, the RFPs. We have a California Legal Aid Reporting Handbook and other resources for grantees to refer to. So for today's discussion, we wanted to shift gears. As I mentioned, expenditures, no further discussions or questions for the committee, but we wanted to sort of shift gears and talk about sort of the services and work provided. So I'll list a couple of considerations just for y'all to consider, and we do want to get feedback from the committee in a few slides. So currently, under the existing reporting framework, grantees are only required to report on IOLTA expenditures, which for 2024 will now be on a semi-annual basis. As for the services information, there's actually no current requirement to report on services or any other evaluative information specific to IOLTA IOLTA is indirectly referenced in those annual legal aid evaluation reports that I mentioned, which again is across the organization, as well as across all funding all funding sources, state bar and non-state bar. Another consideration, again, is IOLTA funds are less restrictive than our other state bar grants. They're not tied to a certain set of activities, project, civil legal services. They can be used relatively liberally within the recommended thresholds that you'll have talked about today. And then earlier, at last month's strategic planning session, the Commission had expressed interest in having more concerted efforts using evaluation data to measure the impact of grant funds, using it to identify opportunities to better align need with funding, increasing accountability and transparency. And then another consideration is just looking at the IOLTA statute, Business and Professions Code, section 6210, which is to expand the availability, improve the quality of existing free legal services and civil matters to indigent persons, and initiate new programs that will provide services to them. So I just wanted to lay the groundwork in terms of what has been approved, the current reporting required of our grantees, and sort of shifting gears to thinking about our IOLTA grants. So the question that I guess will be a loaded one and really open for today's discussion is what information would you like to learn about the use of IOLTA funds and why? We have some initial staff recommendations that I'm happy to share, but just wanted to take a pause here if there are any initial thoughts given sort of the framework and the background presented.
So just, go ahead, Duan, please.
I was just going to say, you know, I know this is the first time you all are hearing this, and then we plan to, before we actually go to the full commission, we would like to get actually substantial community feedback, because this would be, I would say, pretty big shift for them to see whether doable this year or next year, or when the timeline could be, if this is something that they feel will be valuable. We understand also we have a lot of reporting requirements, as that second slide that Crystal said. So and I'm preempting this, but one of the recommendations that you will see is if we're going to do more of IOLTA, then we would like to reduce something else, and Crystal will walk us through that, so that it's a little bit of a swap instead of an adding on to for grantees.
I mean, I think maybe looking at the next slide is helpful, because there is EAF reporting, there's the ILAW reporting that Danielle was talking about at the beginning. And I guess I'm interested in learning what have been the strategies that were viewed as effective sort of outcome reporting for other grants that could be used here. I mean, anyway, it's a little hard for me, like I don't have these slides, I don't think, so I can't go back and look at the prior slide while we're having the discussion to sort of see what the landscape is, I think, but maybe it's on the next slide. So if other people are amenable, why don't we look at what Crystal's maybe put in the next slide?
Sure. So these are just some initial staff recommendations, considering all those prior factors and considerations discussed earlier. One would be to develop specific evaluation questions to capture services and use of IOLTA grant funds. That's a lot just in one bullet point. So I'll segue to the next bullet point. Where feasible, the initial staff recommendation would be that we would leverage the same questions, same framework, tables, etc., in existing grant reporting to allow for easier grantees for easier completion and data comparison across grants. Some questions sort of listed below that we ask in almost all, if not all, of our grants: areas of law addressed, primary target population served, cases closed information, other services or non-representational legal help, and then support center services. There is some outcomes reporting. It's our main and economic benefits outcome data, but I think sort of in consideration of the flexibility of IOLTA, it wasn't in the initial staff recommendations to sort of put that forward, because it's a very specific and technical type of reporting mechanism, and I think sort of knowing like sort of IOLTA's flexibility, it'd be hard to maybe quantify like economic benefits derived from IOLTA funded activities, which may not be project based or case based, etc.
So I
Catherine,
guess
you want me to go
Selena
through
had-
the rest of the list? I see Selena has
It
her hand
seems like
raised.
Selena has a comment, and then I have one question, which might just be, I don't remember things correctly from 4 years ago. So go ahead, Selena.
Well, I'm just a liaison, not a commissioner, but I like Tuan's idea of talking with programs. I think that some programs might find this really hard to implement. And I remember early days of IOLTA, you know, not early, but early in my career days, where a lot of organizations, so the reporting was so hard, they were considering not applying for IOLTA awards. And so I think we would want to make sure that this wasn't a burden for organizations, especially smaller organizations, because I have heard from some of the newer commissioners, they really do want to see IOLTA supporting smaller organizations. And some of this reporting, some organizations can't do that level of detail. So I think we need to, some of the larger ones may be able to, but some of the smaller ones wouldn't. So I think we really should talk to programs and see if, you know, if our desire for better data would mean that we would be, you know, potentially cutting services to some client communities served by those orgs.
So Selena, what do you, I mean, I get, this is, I think maybe it's on the earlier slide, then I missed it. So my recollection was that people already reported for when they did casework on IOLTA, the information about the clients that they served. Is that not accurate?
I'll respond. The cases summary report is organization wide. So even though IOLTA may be included, there's really no way for us to be able to sort of disaggregate that and say IOLTA funded X amount or X cases. So it's included, but it's not, doesn't have its like a dedicated forum to say a portion to IOLTA funding.
And this goes to the next bullet point. I'm stealing Crystal's thunder, but this is why we're thinking like IOLTA specific reporting might be more valuable as a community versus across all sorts of funding. So our suggestion would be to swap it out. So instead of everybody doing main economic benefits across all sources of funding, that they would just do it for IOLTA with the recognition that we understand this foundational funding. So some of the numbers will be low for some programs that choose to use it for more, say, admin and support services that they won't have a lot of services data. But we still think that as a community, though, in the aggregate, that information is valuable. And I would bet money that number for services is still going to be high across all of our programs.
But you would do that and not do it for equal access?
Equal access has its own reporting requirement. We would do that in lieu of the general main and economic benefits reporting that we're requiring now. And that's across, Priscilla, is that I'm right, across all sources of funding, right?
They're already reporting that information both in the CSR as well as specific grant reporting. So we have EAF, HP consumer debt that already has a main and economic benefits reporting. And then we have sort of the larger report that is, they would report on those numbers again, plus like other main and economic benefits funded by other non-state bar grant funds. So it's like we have mostly everything, and then we have the rest of the non-state bar grant funds. We just don't have visibility about IOLTA funding and sort of how that's
being
used.
I think I'm worried, like if you're already collecting that data, like main benefits data for equal access, I don't know why wouldn't you want it reported for all state bar funded work and not just pull out IOLTA? Because like right now, IOLTA is very large. And so I think that's why maybe the discussion was why that might be like important to gather information on. But IOLTA could drop dramatically when interest rates do, and equal access with improved state budget could suddenly become larger. So to me, like as a funder, like I would be interested in knowing about state, at least the two core, what I call core state bar grants, right? About that kind of get the same information about the main benefit. So
we're not suggesting to drop off EF.
Okay, well, it sounded like we were gonna replace IOLTA with everything else. That's
no,
what I
replace IOLTA. There's this is where it's confusing. There's EF. So we'll put that, all of our grant specific ones have a grant specific, including EF. We were suggesting that all stays. The one that we're suggesting to swap out is there's this one that's like, I don't know, we call it like the general main and economic benefits across all sources of funding. And that includes EF, includes IOLTA, includes everything, including state bar, non-state bar funded grants. That's the one that we would suggest to drop off. And one of the reasons like we haven't done that much with that information, it's an incredible amount of information that they would submit. And we're in full recognition, doing the IOLTA one is also a heavy lift, but we just think that information is more valuable than across all sources of funding. EF would still stay, including all of our other discretionary specific grant funding. Or I don't know if it's helpful to toggle back to that one slide, Crystal, with all the reporting. And I'm sorry, I cut you in line, Selena.
So go ahead, Selena.
It's fine, Dwan. I'm the liaison. You're the staff. You can break in front. Yeah, I think for me, it's just, I think the smaller organizations, some of them may have some of their cases will be partially funded by IOLTA, since IOLTA is so flexible. So I think that's going to be the challenge for some organizations that have multiple sources of funding, especially multiple sources of flexible funding, where say they have $500,000 of like their core legal services, and IOLTA pays for half of it and something else pays for the other half. And like for an organization to figure out, wait, what should I have tracked and what should I report on? I think that's going to be like could be a 2-year challenge for some organizations when they're doing the litigation to say, do I need to ask this? If I don't ask it, then do I just like fund it with something else? I mean, we're a small organization too, and we have kind of like a core services that multiple sources of funding fund our core services.
What? Oh God, Catherine.
Go ahead.
I will just say, I think EAF is sort of similar. There are sets of activities, and some of those are partially funded by EAF, by IOLTA, and because of the EAF reporting requirements that were rolled out a few years ago, I think grantees have demonstrated an ability to sort of look into their own respective case management systems or other tracking mechanisms to sort of parse out what cases closed, other services, et cetera, were attributable to EAF. And that funding, that information we've reported to Department of Finance, Judicial Council. So, like, like we're just trying to figure out like what would be tenable, and then also sort of what our existing framework looks like. And since we've done like an EAF like phased in approach, but knowing that IOLTA is more flexible, I think the recommendation is that the structure would be there, but we wouldn't expect or require that IOLTA monies be spent on cases closed, because that may not be the case. Or sorry, I can't complete this thought, but just in terms of like what has happened, the current reporting, and sort of adopting and modifying our reporting in response to all of these changes. I'll go back to
I'm sorry, can we just go back to, I was looking at it.
Oh, yes.
So which of these are you proposing to get
It's
rid
the main
of?
and economic benefits report that we would say would swap out. So we'd phase that out, and instead it would be an IOLTA specific main and economic benefits report.
IOLTA and EAF.
Well, EF is already separated out. That EF is in the box that says state bar grant reporting.
But doesn't EAF collect main and economic benefits?
It does, but it's a separate
right
report. It's already disaggregated.
I see.
Yeah.
Crystal, is it fair to say that all of the other state bar grants, other than IOLTA, already have a grant-specific disaggregated report? And so we would be proposing to replicate that for IOLTA, but what we would be taking away is this more global umbrella report that's capturing all their sources of funding, state bar or otherwise.
Yes.
You're still going to capture all their sources of funding. You're not going to capture what the main and economic benefits are of that funding, right?
In our application, we ask for
I wonder if
our grantees.
I think you might have gone away, or I went away, Dawn. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would say in our application, we ask for sources of funding, but if we do away with the main economic benefit, we don't have the outcomes for those non-IOLTA. I mean, one other thought that we had why the commission might want to consider doing this is then we could show when IOLTA drops, and IOLTA will drop. And if you wanted to,
I think Dwan might
just
have
Dwan that's disappearing.
Yeah, I think so. I'll jump in, and hopefully if Dwan's connection connects. But If there's sort of fluctuations in IOLTA funding and we had quantifiable data, we could demonstrate sort of trends or sort of that impact if we updated the reporting to capture some of these information points. So that would be a consideration, as well as, you know, having available data. If legislators or other audiences wanted to see like the impact of IOLTA funds, we currently don't have that. So we always talk about it a little bit more broadly or globally, you know, using information from the annual legal aid reports, which, you know, it's not quite like an apples to apples comparison, because IOLTA is just one of the funding sources and consideration of other funding that funds an organization.
But I mean, I hear Selena's concern, and that would be the trade-off, right? It's something different, more to build out. I'm not sure if it's actually more work if we actually swap it out, but you know, that it would be a lift to get this up and running. So is that worth it? Is that information valuable enough for the commission and the community? I mean, the staff is putting forward a proposal which says it is, but you know, this is why we wanted to get your initial kind of reaction, and again, a feedback session from grantees, and talk to Selena a little bit more in depth about this too.
I mean, I guess I would start, I only know what my program used to do, right? So I don't know what's done now, but we used to collect main and economic benefits data it was just easier to do it for everyone. And I think we could disaggregate that data because we also knew what the funding source was for each of those cases that were opened. Each one had a funding source that people track their time to. So I guess I'm trying to, and maybe it's because we were a large program, I'm just trying to understand why there's an additional workload. You're only going to do it for casework, I gather, like it's understood that IOLTA can fund other activities, so you're not going to be reporting main and economic benefits if it's not related to a legal service, right? So I don't know. I think it's just like maybe starting from like how many people already collect that data about their IOLTA cases, and if they already collect it, can it be disaggregated already? In which case, maybe that answers the question.
I think Laura's hand is raised too.
Oh yeah, great. Hi, Laura.
Hi. I'm just wondering if these reporting changes would impact the annual reports that you submit to the council and then that we submit to the Department of Finance.
No, this is for IOLTA, so this isn't part of the Judicial Council contract. This, we're not proposing to change anything on the EEF or any of the Judicial Council reporting. So no worries there, Laura. We'll still meet all your deadlines.
All right, thank you.
So currently, where does the aggregated number get of all main benefits? Where does that get reported?
It doesn't. That's part of why we're suggesting something we think has more utility. We issued a report. There's no statutory requirement. There's no legislative ask for it. If you'll recall, in 2018, we issued an impact report. But since then, we haven't done much with the data, and this is why we think something a bit more useful would be great. We're starting this year. Will be our first year starting to do more like I would say communications piece around some of our data. We developed a fact sheet in collaboration with LAC for HP funding that we thought is a good template. So it's getting us to think about what we can do. And so this is where
So maybe, I mean, I think for a future discussion with the committee about this, it would be helpful to understand what's reported on the other grants. So I appreciate like there's kind of this, each of these other grants has separate reporting, but I at least don't remember what the reporting on the other grants is. And like to your point of, is there a good template that's easier to complete and a better way to do something? It just seems like we want to know that, right?
Yeah.
Like is there a way to kind of do a more robust chart that shows what's reported? Like what are the items that are reported on the other funding sources and which ones seem to be made publicly available and therefore might be useful in reporting outcomes? I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit guessing and speaking from pretty old experience now. So But anyway, do other members of the commission have comments or thoughts about this that can maybe help, particularly help frame a future discussion? Is there information that would help you? Okay.
Can I make a comment if another commissioner doesn't have? So, we, the beginning of this year has already started, obviously. And so, if we were going to do something, I would say like a new reporting, we technically should have let programs know last December, but we did let programs know that we were mocking up a proposal. So I'm sensing from the group, maybe we just need to do a lot more work. If that's the case, then we'll still have the feedback session with the grantees, but not maybe it's too rushed to necessarily mock up a proposal for March is what I'm gathering.
So. I feel like none of us, I at least don't know enough about like what are the other opportunities of what people collect. I'm really interested in just general feedback from the grantees about what would work, right? So I don't feel like we should be in a rush to do something. I think it's more important to be thoughtful about what are we trying to measure and why, and what's the burden of doing that. And Eloina has a comment.
Yeah, so along those lines, I guess I was just thinking like, what is the goal? So just in terms of possibly creating more work for the grantees to reach whatever this goal is. And maybe I'm not quite understanding what that goal is for asking for this different set of data. And then also what is I guess knowing what the unmet need for IOLTA funding is, like, are we trying to determine whether or not other programs, need some of this money that are going to some grantees currently? I just don't understand what the current unmet need is for IOLTA funding and how this new data could change that.
Well, I guess I could speak to your first part of your question. I think in conversations with commissioners in and outside of commission meetings is that because we're distributing such a large amount and we have no data point to say as a community, we distributed 95 million this year in terms of IOLTA grant, but we can't say of that 95 million what we've helped this many clients. So I think the impetus was to say some baseline information. And maybe it's not all this main economic benefits, but just something. But what that something is what we need to decide. I think there's probably a general consensus in having something a little bit more than nothing. But maybe it's not the full main economic benefits reporting as the staff is suggesting. So I think that's what we need to figure out for accountability. And also just to say as a community, this IOLTA is great. This is what it's achieved. This is what we've done. This is the impact that we've had across the state. And we can do that with our other grants. We can't do that for IOLTA though.
And I think it's starting one with asking people what data do they already collect? Like, is it to your very first point? Like, what are the number of people served partially or fully with IOLTA funding, right? It may be that that's a number that people could give you, or all large programs could give you, or some way. Like, it'd be interesting to know from a grantee perspective, like what do they already have available because of how they collect their data, so that in some way we're not reinventing things. So I think I'd be interested in like listening to the grantee conversation and seeing what it can already be reported, in part because I just think it's important to be accountable for that. We distributed 95 million, and how did that help people, right? But that data may already exist.
And that would be great. That would be like the optimal answer, but we don't know because we haven't asked. So
right. So let's like maybe starting there to sort of say like, here's what we're trying to achieve, which is it's a lot of money now, and we'd like to be able to report about how it was spent, but also because we know the money's going to go down, use that to leverage some additional funding, kind of make the case for, and what do you currently collect that might help answer that question?
Yeah.
And I think there's value in talking about, like, not just from a programmatic point, but how does this money support your core operations? Because that in some ways is the tremendous value of IOLTA being able to use it for other things. So how do we tell that story too? Because without the core operations to do the important work of fiscal integrity and data integrity and all of those things, it's like losing, like, that message, I think, has to be told too.
In terms of a feedback session and getting feedback from our grantees, we do have a workshop planned for March 7. It was initially intended to provide an overview of the reporting requirements. I think we're going to sort of shift the focus and then get specific feedback about the IOLTA reporting. So I think those questions that you raised, Catherine, I think we were tending to cover during that workshop, just having an open dialogue in terms of what information is currently collected. I think we don't have a lot of visibility, so a lot of the proposals posed was sort of on the assumption that, you know, it would be possible to report on cases closed, but we would get verification and feedback from the grantees during the workshop next week.
And then maybe just clarity on how else they use the money and how to report about why that core funding is so critical to their operations. I mean, just like maybe starting with them doing some of the brainstorming about what exists and what is the information that's going to best tell the why IOLTA's important story from their perspective.
Yes,
that'd be great.
Want anything else to add? It looks like we're going get the feedback from the grantees next week, and then I guess circle back. In regards to implementation and timing, I think that one is also on a pause too until we get more information. And then, you know, I do have a more robust chart in terms of the overview, but there's a lot of reporting. So I think I'll keep that in mind. You know, if this does come up in the commission meeting later this month and have that a little bit more comprehensively described. There's just different components and a lot of elements, so didn't want to overwhelm for purposes of our discussion today. So thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the day? I think we're done, right?
Yes, that is the last.
Remarkable. Thank you to all of you. Like, I know this agenda was very big and the materials were long. But thank you for taking the time and reading them and being thoughtful about it. I really appreciate that. And I think we ended up in a good place. So that was more to come.
The only other thing I would say before we adjourn, if you will, Catherine, is we would still recommend or ask for another member to serve on that working group related to CCWRO. Catherine volunteered to do so.
And I think I suggested that if people didn't want to volunteer now, I suggest they speak to Dwan, but maybe they should just let you know, whichever one. Like, I think
either one of us, because we'll coordinate.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to remind folks that opportunity to participate is available to them.
And I'd like to thank all the staff because they do incredible work.
I agree. They do. A lot of work went into that memo. Not to mention the hundreds of hours in trying to understand what information was submitted. So it's okay. All right. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
No,
we do not. Okay. I think we are adjourned and we have our next meeting. Well, we have the commission meeting in March and we have our next meeting in April, I think. So look forward to seeing you all at the end of March at the commission meeting. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Catherine.